where Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi addressed the media a short while ago, describing the accident scene as a war zone. Our Linda Mnisi was at that briefing and joins us now. Linda, we heard from Panyaza Lesufi, or Premier Panyaza Lesufi, along with other officials from the city of Ekurhuleni as well as the provincial government, also saying that they'll be relying heavily on the police's investigation to get more facts about what actually happened at this accident scene. What else was said at that briefing?
Well, as you rightfully put it, a lot of information put out to the public in terms of the number really of people who died in that explosion, revised to, of course, 9. But interesting that, the Premier revealing the information that the driver of this truck and confirming, in fact, we've known since this morning that he's still alive and, of course, will be questioned. But the investigation itself will give direction in terms of whether the cases that are being investigated, one of reckless and negligent driving as well as of inquest, need to be changed. So at this very moment, we're told even the truck owners are cooperating with the police, giving information in terms of what could have possibly happened. You would have seen there a number of stakeholders, a number of heads of departments, government departments that is, attending this briefing, talking to us about, of course, what needs to be done, the infrastructure that still needs to be evaluated to determine the structural integrity of the hospital itself, but also they need to determine the quality of air in this area. As you'll remember, that this was an explosion of a hazardous substance, so they'll be bringing in people who will be investigating that, and if there's a need for water spraying in the atmosphere, then that will be conducted. From the information that we're also getting outside of this briefing is that the road belongs to the municipality Nhlanhla, and the bridge itself belongs to Prasa. So at this point, the Department of Transport couldn't give much detail specifically around how this truck could have gotten there, because one can imagine for a truck to be driving around and get to a point where they're stuck, they should have known that that is a no-go area, and there should have been signs perhaps on which routes to take in terms of the specifications of those trucks. So we'll be getting more information in terms of how exactly that truck got there. From now, at this point rather, what we know is that it was coming from Richards Bay, headed to Botswana, and that's the information that is currently available. So the police then saying that at a later stage, the investigations, particularly those of the pathologists, will determine whether or not the inquest case should be turned into a murder case.
Well, judging by the reaction from Premier Panyaza Lesufi, he appeared almost dumbfounded as to what was that truck doing on that particular route. As he said, it was heading towards Botswana, but it doesn't make sense as to, this is not the usual route being used by trucks traveling that direction from Richards Bay in this case. Speak to that aspect of what the Premier had to say.
Well, what we know at this point is that it was traveling indeed from Richards Bay heading to Botswana. So there's not much detail in terms of how it got there. From what we understand, they would need to get a permit to transport such hazardous, substances, and that would then determine the kind of route that they would need to take in order to get to their destination. So at this point, investigations will reveal how exactly, that truck ended up there. But one thing that they are pinning their hopes on in Nhlanhla is the fact that the truck driver himself has been injured but is still alive and is in hospital being stabilized. So at a later stage, then police will be able to get answers from him in terms of how exactly he got to that point. Did that truck comply with the regulations and what is required of it to be on that particular road? It's quite clear from it being stuck there that it wasn't supposed to be there. So how it ended up there is a different kind of conversation that would need to be clarified by these investigations.
Last assessment, Linda, what do you make of the scene right now? What's the state of the scene? We do understand that pathology officers are conducting their investigations as well.
Well, from what we know is that that particular road has been damaged severely. The rail infrastructure, in fact, as you would have heard, is completely destroyed. You would have seen the authorities and various heads of government departments doing that walkabout. And what they're saying from that walkabout is that the rail infrastructure completely destroyed. Quite interesting that one of the firefighter trucks was also completely destroyed. As you would have heard, it was one of the first to attend to the scene initially before that explosion, and because it led to a number of the authorities or EMS officials being injured, they had to be taken to a nearby hospital. More information that we're getting is that the nearby houses, 2 of those were damaged, and they're still yet to assess whether or not families can go back into those houses at this point. The investigations will also determine whether or not they need to evacuate the members or the people, the families that live in these nearby houses, but also, evacuate the hospital. You would have heard the Mnisi for Human Settlements as well as Infrastructure telling us that, they still also have to determine the structural integrity of this hospital to determine whether or not they need to evacuate, some patients in this hospital. 13 employees were told, as well as 24 patients in this hospital also impacted and injured as a result of that explosion, which gives you an indication of why family members of those who were in the hospital totally admitted for something completely different and not related to the fire were worried. You would have seen, I spoke to some who said they came immediately after hearing that the explosion happened right next to the hospital. So we're getting confirmation that 13 hospital staff were injured, as well as 24 patients.
Now, Linda, as we wrap up, we also heard Premier Panyaza Lesufi expressing how he's been humbled by the overwhelming response coming from various NGOs who've also responded to the situation out there in Boksburg. What do we know about the support that's being offered or the response from a government side?
Well, from what we've been able to see throughout the morning, there's been various government departments as well as, a number of humanitarian organizations coming to the ground to offer support and really try and reach out to those who are affected, but also, a disaster of this magnitude, the Premier describing it as something that resembles a war zone that we've never seen in our lives. You'd imagine the kind of scope of work that is involved here. So some of those people are assisting the first responders to the scene. So there's quite a number of organizations, a number of government departments, EMS officials, the police, security companies, private security companies, and even private organizations, the CPF, who are on the ground making sure that people are staying as far as possible from the scene. In fact, earlier this morning, I heard one, security official telling the residents who are bystanders that it is because of, these bystanders coming to the scene that many of them were injured. So they're trying to keep members of the community and bystanders as far as possible from the scene, because also the dangers don't only involve the explosion, but also, the structural integrity. As you would know, the streets have been affected, the rail infrastructure has been affected, so they don't know at this point what could go wrong. So the best option is to keep everyone away. It's scorching hot in Boksburg, so you'll know that the need for water, for food, for some of the people who have been here waiting to hear any word on their family members is also quite important. We've heard that they've established a command center, a central command center that will address the needs of those who still have their family members missing. It's right here at the O.R. Tambo Memorial Hospital to assist those who still don't know where their loved ones are. Officially, from the authorities, what we know is that there's only one family that's missing their loved ones. Others are, identified and are accounted for at this particular point. So it seems there is response from various sectors here in the country, trying to assist at the very last minute. As you can imagine, it's Christmas Eve, so a lot of people would have been gone for holidays and not around, but it seems there has been support that's coming. If you would have seen social media earlier today, some of the medical doctors offering their support, saying that if the medical teams at the nearby hospitals get overwhelmed, they would be ready to assist, but the authorities confirming to us that
we will continue getting updates from you. He's out in Boksburg following that press briefing by Premier Panyaza Lesufi, as well as other officials responding to that situation or that blast out in Boksburg.